I would love to hear more about InnerSource.
Yeah.
And in particular, maybe for the audience, just to kind of give an overview as to what InnerSource is. What are the challenges, the common challenges that you see in organizations that are moving in that direction and trying to set up such a collaboration?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because first of all, inner source I would say is like an evolving practice. So, it's not like there's an exhaustive 5 point list that I can tell you that's it. This is exactly it and no more. But I will say that there are many of I mean, when I talk about the idea of using open source methods and practices, a lot of the times it starts with just the principles of openness. So it starts with organizations thinking about, well, is my code visible beyond the team that's working on it? Can other people find it? If they can find it, am I allowing them to create contributions to it? Is it documented well? Do I need a license, interestingly? Because you kind of think there's no need for an internal license, but sometimes there is in certain organizational structures. So some of the same, and then what is the process for for other people to contribute to my project? Do I even want that to happen? So there's a lot of the same principles that you would assume in an open source community that you have to kind of double check. Well, where am I with that in my organization? What are my motivations and what is my goal around that? You would have many people in large corporations who are thinking about inner source, but not necessarily thinking about it as a company wide initiative. They're looking at it for maybe a collaboration between a smaller number of kind of development partners, or they're trying it as a kind of a pilot first of all before maybe rolling it out at a company level. So I would say that in terms of what it looks like, when you think about the things you would expect in an open source project, you could list out a few of them, like the code is visible, it's you can modify it, you can share it without constraints, you can use it without constraints. Some of those things you just have to kind of run through and say, well, what would that look like for my project in this organization? Um, I would say that the conversations can differ somewhat. So one of the things that I find interesting is that even when you kind of list off what would happen in an open source community, um, uh, sometimes that conversation, when you take it within an organization and thinking about internal processes, can be slightly different. Sometimes it makes the conversation easier. So, for example, if someone's doing awareness or education around the fact that their project is available. Well, they have a kind of a constrained audience that they're able to address, and sometimes there are even communication vehicles for them to say, "Hey, there's a new inner source project available. We're open for contributions," and they put it out on the internal whatever channels, communication channels, and they have a little party and they get some funding and they can have some events, and it's all very easy to do. Whereas, I mean, sometimes if you're in the open source community and you go, "Hey, I've got this open source project," tumbleweed. So it's
Crickets.
there's mechanisms that are available internally in organizations that make some of that easier. Um, but then there are also processes inside internal organizations that make some things harder. So when you think about even the culture that's around a particular project. So, for example, if someone is creating an open source project, I mean, they have full autonomy over maybe what license they choose, what how they choose to document it, anything like that. But when you take that into an internal organization, sometimes there are company processes that one has to be aware of. You have to start thinking about, well, what is the open source policy of my organization? Do I have autonomy of what license I use? Can I choose how this will work? And how does it fit with the broader policies and processes that are always already in my organization? So in that context, then how it works might be constrained within an organization. Sometimes that's an individual's choice, and sometimes it has to be done within the context of the organizational structure, rules, norms, that sort of thing.